I went from doing youth work here to being the lead pastor. Just recently, as I retired, I realized, I don't really like this. I want to unretire. So I was looking around, and there was a church. Just shows you how life progresses. There was a church in Arizona, like at Sun City. It's a retirement community. So I sent them my resume, and they wrote back and they said, wow, that is so impressive and we are so excited. If you were just a little younger. Now that's a wake-up call to recognize that you're being told that you are too old to be the lead pastor at a church in a retirement center. What a pleasure it is to be invited to share in such a special day. And I have to also just reflect back on the videos that we saw. And also as you heard the heartbeat of Jesus. And then that moment when it stopped. And you'd think, well, it never started again. But then I listened to Jim Yost and I realized who his heartbeat really was. And I listened to Connie and Harold and I realized who their heartbeat really was. And I listened to Frank and Jan and I listened to Moses Samoseth. And I realized that through their hearts we hear. And through our hearts we continue to hear the ongoing heartbeat of Jesus. And if you remember nothing else from what I share with you today, because I may have nothing else prepared to say, then I want you to remember that. Anniversaries are such great moments to reflect on what's happened in the past and how those events have shaped our lives. Because too often, it just seems to me, we forget to celebrate. We allow days to become ordinary and routine. We miss the magic, the miracle that God has placed in every one of the 24 hours that he gives to us. And in celebrating 75 years, we celebrate 27,393 days. In the psalmist, Moses says, I want you to number your days so that you might gain a heart, a beating heart, the heart of Jesus, of wisdom. And so that's what we are doing on this special day. We dare not overlook John 10:10b. I have come, Jesus said, that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I grew up with the Lookout and the Christian Standard. Those are publications of the Christian church. And I remember in the Lookout, I think it was especially, they would always put the people who had perfect attendance at Sunday school. And it would start out, there'd be little kids that'd been there 3 years. And then there'd be a teenager who'd been there 10 years. And they all were vibrant and they all were happy and they all were glad to be there. And then you'd see 20 years and they'd be a little bit more sober because life is more sober. And then there'd be somebody who had 30 years of perfect attendance or 40 years. I remember one time there was someone there, 45 years of perfect attendance, and I looked at the picture and they were like, and I remember praying, dear Lord, let me miss a Sunday or two. Because I didn't want to grow up and become a spiritual Eeyore. I didn't want to grow up and just get so locked into how important this is that I would forget how important this is and that God really wants to speak through us. Early in 1939, not that many people noticed the arrival of a presence that for 35 years has stood against evil, has trained and mentored young people, one in particular, has used financial resources to uphold the good in society, and who at times has been pretty much alone in the stands that were taken, and yet from 1939 to now has had an impact on people in countries literally around the world. Am I talking William Jessup University? I could be, but I'm not. Am I referring to Central Christian Church? I certainly could be, but I'm not. A lot of people out in the world this month will celebrate the fact that the public beginning of a new superhero was the cover story of Detective Comics number 27, featuring for the very first time Batman and the case of the chemical syndicate. Clearly, what we celebrate today is far more meaningful. What we celebrate today reaches into eternity. For 75 years, this church has been part of God's love story to a lost and broken world. It is a far better story than Bob Kane, the creator of Batman, could ever imagine. I was actually here less than 20% of Central's history. And yet, many of my life memories have been formed in this place. 1/3 of my 51, now 52 ministry years took place in the building across the way and in this building. One of the wisest men I ever met. A man who fashioned special rings so that Aldina could bend her fingers was Lyle Ottinger. I will always remember Benny Ingraham almost running to catch visitors before they slipped away. I think of the passion of a young man, Philip Becker, who had Downs, who came with the Heath family. He could not stand one year the realism of our Easter play. And as he watched the soldiers, probably Ron Hansen, because Ron always had to play a Roman soldier. He watched Jesus being beaten, and it was just so still in that darkened auditorium. And in the middle of that, I heard the voice of Philip yell out, "Stop! Damn it, you're hurting him." And my first thought was, thank God for Philip. Why didn't the rest of us say something? I recall youth groups, all church retreats. The birth of remember Aldina wouldn't let you into the mess hall unless you hugged her first. The birth of my youngest daughter, Talisha, the wedding of my oldest, Tondi. I'm grateful for the time that Bob Richardson spent encouraging my son, Trey. The Jessup family became part of my world, as did the Henrys and so many others. And right down the street, I guess this way, I'm not good with directions, off of Dry Creek Road, a high school senior by the name of Janet Tash had developed a brain tumor. And Janet had two goals. One was to graduate from high school, and the other was to learn as much about Jesus as she could in the time that she had. And every week for a number of months before her death, she and I would do lessons together. The tumor had pressed so much on her optic nerve that she could no longer see. During the week, her mom would read her the questions, and her mom would then write out Janet's answers. Then Janet and I, when I went over, would go over them. She taught me far more than I ever helped her. All of those things, all of those memories, a focus on music, a passion for the lost, wisdom, a heart for missions, a desire to know Jesus more, encouraging kids to go into ministry, helping others in good times and in bad, all of that and more is part of the DNA of Central. And so we celebrate. And in some ways, I suppose the vision that Bob Kane had back in 1939 and the vision of Bill Jessup has some similarities. They both began early in that year. Both had a story to tell, a story of injustice being defeated and the triumph of good. But I don't want to compare this church to Batman. I want to compare this church to one of the key figures in the book of Genesis. A man by the name of Abram. Abram grows up in a pagan culture. His was the city Ur, a major commercial center not that far from Babylon. A hotbed of various religions, a true pagan culture, and yet Abram believed in one God. For Central, it's been a growing culture that disengages from God. In many, many ways, we've lost the culture war. There are things now that are accepted we never thought would be, but they are. And so we just have to continue to press on, knowing that we are more and more an isolated voice. There was some similarity between Abram and Central. He was family-oriented. One of his brothers, he had two, died early and left a son behind. Abram, takes that boy, raises him as his own. That's Lot. He also takes over his dad's business after his dad dies. If you want to think of a clan, if you want to think of a tribe, if you want to think of a family that has incredible influence, you just look to the Jessups and all of the folks that they have connected with and intertwined with and have embraced. Abram has this very rich heritage that his family brings. According to the genealogy in Genesis, as you read it, Abraham, that's who we will eventually know him as, has over 100 years to talk with and learn from Shem, who was one of Noah's 3 sons. Shem is Abram's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. He is still alive when Abram is walking the earth. Imagine those conversations. Shem talking about Noah and his steadfast faith in the midst of the wicked culture. So wicked that God will eventually wipe it out with a flood. Great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Shem, did it stink in the ark? Did they just sleep? What kind of rain was it? Did you even know what rain was? I mean, just all of those kinds of questions. But all of that is impacting Abram's life. Maybe the greatest comparison is that Abram trusts the voice, the word of God. As he grows up in Ur, the family somehow senses that God has a desire to have them have a fresh start. Stephen is telling the story in Acts chapter 7, and he says God has told them to leave their country, leave their people, go to a new place, and just like that, they go. There's Abram, there's his wife Sarai, there's his nephew Lot, there's his dad Terah. The rest, they leave behind the memory of the brother that is already gone. They leave behind another brother named Nahor. And these 4 go out doing what God commands them, taking nothing, the scripture says, with them at that time. They get as far as northern Mesopotamia, which is now Turkey, and they settle in a little town called Haran. Now, how long they stay there, we don't know. But we do know that Abram's daddy, Terah, dies there. We know this. Abram is in Haran in response to God's call. And you can know this. Central Christian is here, has grown to this point in response to God's call and leading. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 5, we learn that Abraham has accumulated possessions. He has acquired people who work for him. He has been very successful. I can easily imagine his birthday party as he enters maybe into his late 60s or early 70s. Or maybe it's an awards banquet that the city of Haran is having for him. And I can hear the speeches. Abram, you have done so well. We are so proud of you. We're glad to have you be a part of our city. You have followed the Lord for over 60 years. You've been blessed. You've made a difference in your world. I bet you're looking forward to retirement. We put a book together listing all of your accomplishments over the past 75 years. Several people have sent papyri messages. And so all of this is going on. And it would be so easy as Abram hears all of this to think, wow, it's been a long time. It's been a really good run. I think it's time now for somebody else to take over. It's time for somebody else to step in the harness and pull the plow. But that wasn't God's plan. Listen to Genesis 12. The Lord had said to Abram, leave your country, your people, your father's household, go to the land I'll show you. So he had gone from Ur to Haran, kind of got sidetracked. You ever have that happen? You know what God wants you to do, and you get to a certain spot and you go, nah, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe, but I will make you into a great nation. This is what God had said, and I'll bless you. I will make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I'll curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Now, I left out one verse. I left out the one verse that I want you to remember maybe most of all from the message this morning. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And the next line is, Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. I think this, as I said, is the most important comparison between Central Christian and Abram. Both are 75. And the best is yet to come. Abram's name will become Abraham, the father of many nations. He'll live 100 more years. Isaac, the son of promise, the one through whose line Jesus will be born, will not be born for another 25 years. Abram won't be a grandfather to Jacob and Esau for another 60 years beyond that. So as he celebrates his 75th year, the greatest chapters of his story haven't yet been written. Make no mistake, he does great things in those first 75 years. Those are critical, important years. They lay a foundation of trust and obedience that everything else is built on. But it's his years as Abraham. It's from this point on, at age 75, that we remember the most. I do not believe it is God's goal for Central to live in the past. Nor is that the aim of this celebration. Do we rejoice in 75 years of his grace showered down on this church? Absolutely. Do we think that now our time has passed and we need to close shop? Never. God wants to do so much more with Central. Certainly he wants to see each of us grow more Christ-like, because we're not done yet. It was almost 5 years ago. I was asleep in the corner of one of the ICU rooms at Redlands Hospital. And my oldest daughter came over and shook me and she said, "Daddy, it's time." And so I got up and the two of us stood by Aldina's bed and watched the lines all slow and then flatten. And we heard the alarms begin to sound. And as her life came to a close and she stepped into eternity, we hadn't planned this. I don't even know which of us began it, but we began to sing, "What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms." And we got to the chorus, and we heard the alarms going off, and the nurses were running into the room. But the chorus said, "Leaning, leaning," the alarm's going off, "safe and secure from all alarms, leaning on the everlasting arms. I stepped back into the pulpit about a month later. It was the first sermon after her passing. And I said to the people then, despite such a tragic chapter, tragic in the sense of loss, I said, I've come to understand that I have been and I will continue to be part of a very good, a terrific book that God is writing. And my life continued to unfold. I had no idea what God had in store for me. When I went home from the memorial service, on the floor of the garage, there was a roll call card, and I picked it up just as I walked through, turned it over and recognized Aldina's handwriting, and it said, not even Don knows where he'll be or what he'll be doing a year from now. It wasn't dated, so I put it in a plastic thing, and it stayed on my desk for the last 4 years. My life, your life as a church, your life has ups and downs, but God isn't finished with you yet. 75 years doesn't close the doors or end the story. There's so much more. I had no idea what God had in store for me. But I do know this, when we are available to God's leading, He does some amazing things. It was almost 5 years ago that Aldina passed away. It was just over 5 days ago that I stood in a gazebo at a restaurant overlooking the city of San Bernardino and shared wedding vows with a lady whose heart was so big that when she was 50, she adopted an infant. So I'm not only married again, I'm on my honeymoon this week. Now, I kind of feel like a piker because I'm only 72 and I know we're celebrating 75. But I also have a 7-year-old to raise. So you can be praying. I told Donna I was going to do this. So I want you to meet my wife, Donna. I won't make her come up here. But Donna, if you'd stand for just a minute. On this 75th anniversary, give the past a great big hug. Embrace and give thanks for the days. Enjoy the history that 900 months reveals, but don't just hold on to that. That's what Mary Magdalene had to learn. We celebrated Easter just 2 weeks ago. Seems like forever. It's just 2 weeks ago. Easter didn't begin as a great day for Mary. You probably know the story. She rushes to the tomb and it's empty, and she runs back to tell the guys, and they come and they look, and yeah, it's empty, and they're not sure what to believe. And then Mary looks in, and there's some angels inside. Who are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for Jesus, and I need to know where he is. And they don't say much, and she goes outside, sees Jesus, but doesn't know that it's him, thinks it's a gardener. Where have you put the body of my Lord? And he says to her, Mary. And hearing that voice just transforms everything. And she wheels back around and she says, the text says there in John, Rabboni, teacher. And my guess is that she falls to her knees and she begins to hold on to him. And Jesus says to her, Mary, don't hold on. Don't try and keep me here. Don't try and make this moment be the only moment of your life, because there's more that you need to do. I want you to go and tell the others what's going on. And if we just stay here, that'll never happen. But she clings. I can almost hear her saying, I lost you once. I don't want to ever chance that again. It was so hard. You have no idea. And now you're back. And I'm holding on, and I don't want to change a thing. Let's just keep everything as it is. Ah, church, it is so easy to fall into that trap. Let's just keep it like it is. You know, when we can get this many people and we can sing all of the hymns, why do we have to do other songs? Why do we have to let other people, let God speak to their spirit and present a song for their generation? Let's just do it. I don't want to let go. I don't want to let go. Jesus had a ministry for Mary to fulfill. I want you to go and tell the disciples. But before she could carry out that ministry, she had to let go of the past, really had to let go of the present, and then move forward into her future. Can I tell you, if you are a current member of this congregation, let Central grow and adapt and change. Let the church develop new wineskins. This is a day to obey. This is a day to say yes to Jesus, to say yes to his word, to say yes to the direction of his spirit. You don't have to take great big steps. They can be great little steps. Be kinder today than you were yesterday. Pray for this transition that's going on in leadership. Ask God to live his life through you. Years ago, oh man, really was years ago, I preached a sermon at the college chapel about, from Genesis 46, Muppum, Huppum, and Ard. Now some of you know the story, not much to it. Last three kids of Benjamin, grandchild of Jacob, 52, 53, and 54. Muppum and Huppum, as far as I could tell, were twins. You know, might as well be. Child number 8 and 9 for Ben and his wife. And finally they have one more, and they ask her, well, honey, what do you think we ought to name this one? And she probably said, I don't know, this has really been hard. And so they go, oh, okay, it's a great name. We'll call him Ard, and that's... Now here's the point I want you to understand. What did they do with their life? We don't know. All we know is there's Muppum, Huppum, and Ard. You know, they could have been really discouraged. They could have felt like they were lost in the crowd. They could have thought they had really funny names. They could have felt really picked on. They could have recognized that their grandfather had been a cheat, had cheated his brother out of a birthright. They know that their dad, Benjamin, caused their grandfather's favorite wife, Rachel, to die in childbirth. They could have seen all of those negative things, been paralyzed by fear and done nothing. Just the opposite. They could have just gloried in their heritage. Their dad was Joseph's favorite. They were part of God's promise. They could get away with stuff because nobody noticed grandchild 52, 53, and 54. But they could look at all of that and be so puffed up. Wow, this is who we are. This is what we get to do. And they could have been so puffed up, they could have felt like they didn't have to do anything. They could have been scared to do anything. They could have felt like we don't have to do anything. Or they could have used their heritage as an incredible foundation and done all that God called on them to do. Some of you have pools at home, I'm sure. Some of you get in your pool the way I get in my pool. It's just a little bit at a time. You know, it's just like, oh, jeez, okay. And it's how some of you live your Christian life. No. Roger, you talked about that. Some people take a long time to make that decision. I understand that. But I'll tell you, there's nothing more exciting than just cannonballing in. You know, just kaboom! And just make a huge splash. I said earlier, we've lost the culture war. I think we have. We tried to elect morality, and you can't elect people. You can't get judges who will do what the Bible wants you to do. That only happens when your life is transformed. I look at this. This is so incredible what has been done. But not only do you have to transform the structure, you've got to transform the spirit. And all of this would be for naught if you're not ready to say yes to people outside your circle coming to find Christ in this place. We've been real good at telling the world what we're against. We've not been very good at telling the world that we love them with the love of Jesus. Isaiah chapter 58, from the Message, God says, I'll always show you where to go. I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places. You'll use the old rubble of past lives, of past 75 years, to build anew, rebuild the foundations. You'll be known as those, here's Lyle Ottinger, you'll be known as those who can fix anything. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, and make the community livable again. After 75 years, don't think that the work is done. The theme is find us now faithful unto death. I mentioned Aldina earlier. When I preached that first sermon after she had gone, I found a note that she had written to herself. I want you to hear it. It was in one of her pink notebooks in her distinctive left-handed writing. Live every day to the fullest. Do my work, this was her voice, but don't let it get in the way of God's interruptions. Enjoy my material blessings, but don't let them become more urgent, more enjoyable, or important than investing in God's kingdom on earth. Love and take care of my family, but never forget the family of God or his children who don't believe yet. I underline that. Praise and encourage my husband in every way I can, but remember to praise and spend time with the only one I love more. Live every day to the fullest, but always be keenly aware that this life is not all that there is. The best, she wrote, is yet to come. Central Christian, after 75 years, as good and glorious as it has been, the best is yet to come.